Hi everybody, it's Rob Acton here again. Another video in the series to teach you how to play the City of Stains, which is up and available to play on Tabletop Simulator. In this video, I'm going to deal with a very important aspect of the game, which are the actions known as standard actions, which you will take often and commonly in the game. And to demonstrate how the standard actions work, I'm going to go into Tabletop Simulator and put up this scenario that we've dealt with before, which has advanced somewhat. Once again, dealing with a three-player game between the Crown, which is the yellow faction, the Circle, who are the blue faction, and the Guild, who are the red faction. We're going to pick up the game with the blue faction currently holding the first player token, so they would be first to play. Now, all of these actions are taking place in the action phase, which was the phase I glossed over in the previous video because it requires a couple of videos of its own. In this video, I'm going to deal with what are referred to as standard actions. Now, in order to play a standard action, a player must play a card from their hand. If you look at the table setup, if I zoom out, you'll see that the Circle player and the Guild player both have 3 cards in hand. This indicates the start of the turn, whereas the Crown player has 4 cards in hand, and that's because at the beginning of this turn, you will see the Crown player had 4 cubes instead of 3, and was therefore able to draw 1 more card than the other 2 player factions. So, what are the options? Well, they are all set out down here at the bottom of the board in graphical form, and I'm going to go through each and every one of them as if one of the players was taking that action on their turn. Now that's uncommon in that players will most commonly also try to take advanced actions, but this video will deal only with the basic actions. So beginning with the player who's playing the Circle, that player would choose a card from their hand. I'm going to just become the Circle to give you an idea of what cards are in hand, not that it matters. So whatever is on the cards, in order to take a basic action, the Circle player plays the card face down in front of him. You don't have to reveal what's on the card. In fact, you probably shouldn't. And you play it face down. And that allows you to take one standard action. Whether it's a standard action or an advanced action, it is important to note that before any action, you may perform what is known as a move. A move refers to the movement of one of your leaders, and those leaders can either be deployed from your faction board into the city, or they can move from one quarter in the city to an adjacent quarter. Adjacency of quarters is indicated by these double-sided arrows, so you know exactly which quarters are adjacent to the one where your leader currently is. And the third type of movement is to move the leader from the city back to the faction board. That doesn't happen a lot, but you may want to perform that withdrawal movement. So before you take any action, you are entitled to a move. You don't have to take the action with the same leader that made the move, but you are always entitled to a move, provided that the move precedes the action. In other words, the move must take place before the action. Now we are the Circle player, and we're going to decide to take the first available basic action on the row down below. Now this action, which has a leader's head icon together with the icon indicating the action itself, is known as the convert action. By means of this action, an influence token is converted from another faction to yours, and it's replaced by one of yours. But before taking the action, just note that this action, as well as certain of the others, have the leader icon on them. What that means is the action may only be taken in a quarter where you have a leader. It doesn't have to be the same leader who performed the move, but the action can only be performed in a quarter where you have one of your leaders. That's what's indicated by the leader icon on some of the basic actions. And this particular action, which is the convert action, has such an icon. So the circle player decides to perform a convert action. He's trying to get more of his leaders onto the board, so they placed a leader onto the board as a deployment movement before taking the action. Now, if you deploy leaders, you may only deploy them to the area which is your home quarter. In this case, of course, the circle chose the Warren at the outset of the game. That is where the leaders must be deployed to. In this case, the circle decides to perform the convert action in the Warren. The only one rule that you always need to remember when performing the convert action is you always convert civilians before influence tokens of other factions. In this particular case, the only other faction in the quarter are civilians. So I remove a civilian and I add an influence for the circle. And you'll see that the effect of that is that I now have control of this quarter, because when I say I mean the circle now has 7 influence, civilians 6, and neither of the other two factions has any. Therefore, the circle controls 1 quarter, so I advance its token to match the other two, which also control 1 quarter each. And that's the convert action. Convert 1 influence, provided you observe the rule that you always convert first any civilians before converting influence of other factions. It's only when there are no civilians that you may convert the influence of another faction. That's the first basic action. Let's move on now to the guild. The guild are going to also take a card from hand, place it face down to take a basic action, take a move should they wish to. In this case, I'm going to actually move one of the leaders in play. I'm going to take this gentleman who is known as Garen the Peacock, who is a member of the guild, and I'm going to move him across the river. I can, because the bridge is still intact, and I'm going to attempt the explore action. Now, the explore action, which is the second action depicted over here, is an attempt to explore the basements and derelict underground areas of the city in a hope to acquire treasure or wealth or some other benefit. The thing you need to know about the explore action is it requires the roll of a die. Now, certain actions do and certain actions don't. The explore action is one that does. And like every other action that requires a die roll in the city, the target number is 6. But you always add the level of the relevant leader to that roll. And Garen the Peacock is a 2nd level leader, so we will add 2 to the dice roll. Something else to notice about Garen is that he is actually a specialist in this particular basic action. You will see on his standee that there is an indicator that this particular action, when Garen takes it, he rolls a d10 rather than a d6. The default is a d6, but some leaders have abilities that allow them higher dice for certain actions. And Garen, it wasn't a coincidence that I used him to do the explore action. He is the best explorer of all of the leaders in the city of Staines. So he's going to roll a d10. He's going to add 2 to the roll. Here goes the roll. I rolled a 5, adding 2 for a 7, meaning he's got or equaled or beaten the requisite, which is 6, and therefore he gets to flip over. And I promise I didn't check that, but that is a very lucky flip, because what that indicates is that he has acquired 3 treasures. Treasures can have value in the game and can be traded in depending on certain other actions. But needless to say, that is a good outcome. He takes the exploration token, keeps it flipped up, and it is removed from the game and will no longer exist in this quarter. So there are a finite number of exploration tokens. If he had rolled a 5 or less, it would have had no effect. His turn would be over, and the next person would be able to play. And that is the exploration action. Now move on to the crown. The crown is going to demonstrate the third of the actions, known as the contest action. Like the other 2 before it, it requires a leader in the area. And like exploration, it is the other basic action that requires a die roll. But this is the contest action. This is the most aggressive of the basic actions, in that it provokes a contest between your faction and that of another faction. It can only occur in a quarter where both your faction and the faction with which you wish to have the contest have influence. Now, if you look at the board at the moment, there are very few locations in which more than one faction has influence other than civilians. But that can be dealt with, because when a leader moves, and bear in mind, at the start of every action, you may do a move, and I'm going to demonstrate one. We'll take Prince Kovich. We'll move him from the hill into Louston. But when a leader moves, that leader is entitled to take with them a number of influence equal to their current level. Now, Prince Kovich is a level 2, so we transfer, we don't have to, but for this purposes, Kovich transfers 2 with him. And now he takes the contest action, and he chooses the guild as his opponent. Contests can get more complicated because alliances can form in the contest, but for present purposes, the contest involves a dice roll by both parties, modified both by the leader's level that they choose to use in the contest and the number of influence they have there. So Prince Kovich is a level 2. The crown has 2 influence in the area, and he doesn't have any special abilities in contest, unfortunately. So he will roll a d6. I'm going to put the d6 over here. Now, the guild, although it has influence, doesn't have any leaders in the quarter, and therefore can't use the bonus of any leaders in order to modify their dice roll. They can use the number of influence. So Kovich rolls a 6. All right, best possible result. The 6 is added to his level to make 8, added to the total influence to make 10. Whereas the guild rolls a 5. Together with the 2 influence they have there for a total of 7. The difference is 3. And in contests, the loser of the contest removes a number of influence equal to the difference. Now, there are only 2 here, and they were required to move 3, so both influence tokens of the guild are removed. The other rule to remember is that contests always take a toll, and you always remove half rounded down of the successful party's influence. So we removed 2 because that's all they had. So 1 of the successful party's influence is removed. And that is the end of the contest. Because the crown was successful, we also then take an influence token and place it here on this contest token or this contest icon in the top left corner of the map. And this is to indicate a victory. And for every token that you accumulate in this area, you will gain an additional +1 on future contests. So the more you succeed in contests, the better you get at it. That is the contest basic action. The next action is known as the build action. And this is an action which in this case will be taken by the circle. The circle can of course move as they wish. Let's imagine they do. And they decide to move this leader. Well, let me leave this leader on the board. Let's say they decide to move one of their existing leaders into an adjacent quarter from the warren into the hill. And they decide to take the build action. Now, bear in mind the build action has a leader icon on it, so it can only be performed in an area where you have influence. This would be a very bad move because if you look at the cost to build, is 5 in the warren and 6 in the hill. These are the two most expensive areas to build in. So rather than move into the hill, I would rather this particular leader move into the west quarter because building costs there are only 4 coins. And lo and behold, that's the only money the circle has. And they're going to attempt to, not going to attempt, they're going to build this building, the Inquisition. Now, the Inquisition is a religious building, goes into the next available slot. But because the church is not in play, this means that the only faction that would place influence onto it would be the blue flag of the circle. So the circle places the flag and has built, or at least will have built, when it pays its coin. Now, you will note that the build action is in a slightly different color to the other basic actions, and that is because it's colored green to indicate that payments for buildings are made to the Costa, which is the green faction. That would be the case if the Costa were in the game. They are not in this particular game. And so the coins are merely spent to the bank, and I've just deleted them in Tabletop Simulator. My building is now built, my leader is in place, and the next thing I do is I look at the bottom of the building card, because every building card entitles you to a specific additional action. It's written on the bottom. This happens once and only when you build the building. This one says, remove and discard 1 card from the hand of another player. So that's a fairly mean thing to do. But in this case, the target is fairly obvious because the crown has more cards than anyone else. So I'm going to remove and discard one of the crown's cards. They won't get to play it this round. And every building has a different special ability that you can use when you place it. That is how the build action works. The next action also requires a leader in the quarter, but this is the quarter action. These large discs that are distributed randomly at the beginning of the game are specific locations that allow a once-off action per round. So in this case, the guild is now their turn. Let's imagine they decide to bring one of their leaders into play, and they decide they want to take this action at the People's Forum, which allows them to gain 1 additional vote in the Royal Council. This action can only be taken You need a leader in that area, as you can see. And when you take the action, you flip over the disk to indicate that it is no longer available for this round. The effect would be, in this case, to take an influence and place it here, meaning one more vote in the Royal Council, the effect of which we will get to in a later video. So that's all that happens when it comes to the quarter action. The next one, which is highlighted in red, which should give you an idea as to who's going to make money off this particular action, is known as the plan action. And it relates to the buildings that you see out here, excuse me, in this row, and to the deck. When you take this action, you're not required to have a leader anywhere specific, but you are entitled to buy one of the cards in this row. Excuse me, the costs are set out below the cards. So two coins for the card in this position, 3 coins for the card in this position, 4 and 5. So as the cards slide down, they get cheaper to buy. And when you do buy them, not surprisingly, the person that gets the money, or the faction that gets the money, is the guild, for they control the corrupt planning office within the city of Staines. Alternatively, when you take that basic action, which is the plan action, you may decide to merely take a random card off the top, in which case you trust to luck, but you pay no coin to the guild in order to do so. That's the planning action. Then we have the earn action. This is very simple. You don't require a leader in any specific place, but like all actions, you may move before taking the action, and you simply gain 2 coins from the bank. This is often resorted to in situations where a player is very short of money and needs it for a specific purpose, such as a build or something else. Then we have the training action, which is the action whereby you level up your leaders. Remember, certain leaders will start at level 2, others at level 1, and the maximum level is level 3. But this action and the next one have an icon on them that I need to explain. And this icon indicates that this action may only be taken in respect of leaders who are either on your faction board or in your home quarter. So they've got to be close to home to perform these actions. If a faction were to decide to take the level up action, let us imagine it is the Crown in this case, and the Crown decides they wish to level up one of their leaders. They could choose to level up any of the level 1 leaders on their board. Alternatively, they do have one leader, the King's Axe, who is currently in their home quarter, which is Gate Town, and they therefore decide to level that leader up from level 2 to level 3, making that leader more effective at everything they do. So the level up basic action is simply that, or it's known as training. The next and penultimate action is healing. Over the course of the game, your leaders are likely to acquire what are known as malady tokens. So by way of example, if one looks at the King's Axe, he would currently have a single malady token. Single malady token of itself has no negative effect, but if a leader ever acquires 3 malady tokens, then those tokens are removed. The leader is removed from the board and placed in the graveyard. And to indicate they have died, we take one of these skull icons and place it on to the leader. Now that leader no longer has malady tokens, but is also no longer alive and is currently a resident of the graveyard. So malady tokens can be quite bad. So what this basic action allows you to do is to remove a malady token from a leader, and that leader has to be either on your faction board or in your home quarter. The last action, it's the last basic action, which, as like all actions, can be preceded by a move, can only be taken in an area where you have a leader and also where there are at least 2 rats. So currently, nobody would be able to take that action, save for the guild, because there are 2 rats in the West Quarter. However, the guild has no leaders there, so they still wouldn't be able to take the action. But if we had a situation in which the guild did have a leader, they could take this action, which is known as the disperse action. What the disperse action does is it takes your own stack of influence in the area and disperses that influence into all adjacent quarters. Now, you can decide the order into which you disperse, but you cannot decide where you disperse to, and you must disperse, if possible, to all adjacent quarters. Now, the West Quarter has only 3 quarters that are adjacent to it: North Catch, the Warren, and Gate Town. And so 3 influence will be moved. 1, 2, 3. That is how the disperse action works. There must be a leader there, and there have to be at least 2 rats for the disperse action to take place. The more surrounded by other quarters a particular area is, the more effective the disperse action tends to be, and therefore the hill in particular and the warren are very effective places to build up large amounts of influence and then disperse, because they are central and adjacent to many other quarters. Well, that's it for the basic actions. You can in fact play an entire game using only the basic actions and never turning your action cards over to their face upside, but that would be a pity because you miss all the tactical fun that's available in on the front side of each faction's action cards. But for present purposes, if you were only if you only wanted to use your cards face down, you could take all of these available basic actions, and you could potentially win a game doing so, although I haven't seen it done. Anyway, that's basic actions. I hope you enjoyed that and that it gave you an idea of how the various basic actions play and why you would play them in certain circumstances. I look forward to the next one, and I hope you enjoyed the video. This is Rob Acton saying goodbye.